this and then we're going to get going.
Perfect.
So the first question is basically tell me about yourself, include your background, family, hobbies.
Okay, a little about me. I grew up in Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. I was born in Washington. My parents were federal government employees.
Stop.
They...
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
This is going to be better with the light off. Okay, let's
Okay.
start from the
Start
beginning.
over?
Yep.
Okay. Are we okay with the two lamps?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So a little about me. I grew up in Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C. I was born in the district, and my parents both worked for the federal government at the time that they met. And so our family in D.C. and in Virginia was by and large made up of transplants because folks were not necessarily from there. They grew up in other places, much like my parents, who grew up in Illinois and in Utah respectively, which then brought us back to Utah when my dad was transferred for the FBI to come to the Salt Lake City division and work here. And that was the rest of my growing up years spent in Salt Lake City, living in Cottonwood Heights, growing up, going to high school here, and then thinking about college. And originally I had perceived of going to school at either George Mason University or Georgetown, and eventually law school at Georgetown because that was my hometown school. And I didn't know my affection for going to the U, and yet it sort of just became the hometown school. For me, for my family, it was where we cheered for sports, which it continues to be a hobby and an interest for myself, my husband, our children. And then really it's just been sort of rooting ourselves in our respective work and raising our kids here. And thankfully we have a continuous, presence of our extended family, both my husband's family and my own, here in Utah. And really I define myself in very what I think of as plain ways. Someone's wife, someone's mother, a sister and a friend. But really I define myself very plainly as a lawyer. I take such pride in that term as part of who I am, and I love doing it. So I really hope that my work with the Utah State Bar is a reflection of that joy and a reflection of that passion for the skill and the tact and the rigor of the work, as well as the kind of service that so many of my colleagues and friends lend to Utah, to the nation. I just have such joy at calling myself a lawyer. I know that sounds so strange. That's such an odd thing to say. And I don't know that we find a lot of folks who take the kind of joy that I do at the work. I think if you really root yourself in your profession, if you define yourself partly by what you do all day long, it's a different kind of work that you perform. And I think you perceive of your contribution differently than just what you do between 8 and 5. It becomes a reflection of you. And you want your peers and your colleagues and your friends to see you in the work somehow, to know you better, to think of you as a person of faith or character or good reputation or even fallible, really, like to know all your foibles and all the nerdiness of who you bring, what you bring to your work. I'm really a civics nerd. I mean, that's probably the first definition you should probably give for me. I mean, let's just be honest. But it also it's a reflection of who I was when I was 8 and 18 and again at 28 and now just sort of marching forward into the rest of whatever my life is. I really think lawyer defines it to a certain extent.
So how did you get into lawyering? What drew you to the profession?
I think I always talked about being a lawyer, ironically enough. I think my father had friends who were lawyers in the FBI. They were agents though, and then we had other colleagues and friends, neighbors, parents of other kids I knew who were lawyers, but some of them did very non-traditional things. Like I remember when I was a kid, we would go to this antique bookstore, and the owner of the bookstore talked about himself as a lawyer. And I remember thinking to myself, this is the coolest place in the universe, this old bookstore with all these old leather-bound books and these fascinating pictures and title pages and illustrations and all these signatures of other authors. And I would think to myself, well, being a lawyer has to be the greatest job ever, because not only do you get to do whatever it is that lawyers do, but you might own a bookstore. We had friends who were agents in the FBI. They also owned a restaurant. And I thought it was a key, sort of like to unlock this possibility of all these other things that you could do aside from working with a client, working with the government, working in the court, developing a policy, maybe changing something. That idea very much resonated with me, that I could do that work, but also maybe something else that just sort of on the side was of such interest to me. And I haven't opened a restaurant or a rare bookstore, but maybe the other side piece is still evolving. But I think some of that kind of, it feeds me in things like teaching a CLE, or being with law students, or helping conduct mock trials in an elementary school. It's all these little ways that lawyering becomes something other than serving a client alone. While that is entirely laudable work, it was all of the ways that a lawyer could present themselves and work and do good things and change things in a meaningful way that spoke to me. Does that make sense?
Of course.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Okay.
This award is recognizing your community and public involvement. And I was just wondering, how does that work with your position at the bar?
Oh, I think it ties directly to my work with the bar. I think being a part of the bar as a licensee and being a part of the bar as a staff member is sort of a luxurious perspective, because I get to see both sides of what we do in terms of lawyering and community engagement. I want my role in CLE in particular to be as an ambassador for the profession. We don't greet 15,000 lawyers all at once, and some would say thankfully, and others would say, but then I only know one sliver of the population. And so part of what I feel very inclined to do as a member of the bar staff is to ensure that people know what a lawyer is and who a lawyer is, to define that about people, to define that about relationships, to define that certainly in the realm of public service and engagement. I think for me, the greatest byproduct of now being in the profession for 25 years is the relationship group as a whole that I have built. I started that in college and in law school. My peers were a tremendous example to me. I was pretty young in law school, and so I was very green, and I hadn't had a lot of real world life experience. I'd had plenty of classroom experience, but not a lot of rubber meets the road, this is how this works in life kind of experience. And my colleagues and peers were generous enough to share their lived experience with me in law school, to give me some insight about those things, but also then just gaining it because of aging. It's sort of lovely that I can bring that level of experience and exposure and relationship building to my place in the bar staff. I really also want to be an ambassador for my peers on the bar staff. I want our colleagues in the law to know the dedication and the professionalism and the diligence that happens in this building. It's a remarkable task to manage, to administer the profession, to help regulate the profession, and to give good advice around policy development, both in the legislature and with the courts, as well as in different private and public entities. And the bar is a remarkable profession for all the things it contributes, both for clients and courts. But the bar staff is also a remarkable professional group. They do a lot on a shoestring, which is simply short of, just spectacular to watch. But they also give of themselves. There's such a willingness and a generosity to want to help our colleagues who encounter what you wouldn't think would be novel things in the practice of law. And yet, at least once a week, something emerges where everyone sort of looks at each other and goes, gosh, this might be the first time we've answered this question, which seems so strange because we answer other questions thousands of times over. But it's joyful to see the willingness to tackle a novel or a specific or even an emotional and a vulnerable question that someone poses as a member of the legal profession and says to its regulatory body, I need the help of your institution. Can you lean back and help me? And the idea that there are a group of people who come to work every day just wanting to do that well, it's just a sight to be seen. I mean, really, truly, it's a privilege to be part of that group. I've known the bar staff now for well over 2 decades, a variety of folks coming and going as being part of the staff. And without fail, I have found a friend on the other end of the phone when I called myself as a licensee with a question or sent an email. But I also find such skill in the way in which people conduct everyday business of the bar. It's a remarkable institution to gather a profession whose job it is sometimes is to critique, sometimes it is to lend suggestion even when one isn't asked for. Sometimes it's to ask questions just simply out of a need to know further or just to explore. And these are all skills that lawyers build, and yet they return to their home institution and do the same thing to them that they might do for a client or in a court or in another setting. And so we've had to, adapt and be resilient and find ways of solving problems that we didn't know we were going to find ourselves within. And yet I take such joy at my bar staff colleagues because they're just so capable. And I don't know that everyone sees that. If you're not inside this building every day, maybe you wouldn't see that. And yet I hope so many of my colleagues are resonating. If they see this or hear this, that they go, yeah, that's entirely how I know the bar staff. That's entirely how I think of those folks. If I pick up the phone and call over there, someone's going to greet me with a willingness to resolve my issue. And sometimes it's very simple. It's just a minor administrative task. And other times it's very complex. It's born of a very challenging circumstance, either for a lawyer or a client or both. And we want to give people who are working in a profession of people's problems a soft landing whenever we can accomplish it for them. And that's lovely.
Well, I love you've explained what keeps you motivated in your role, but you've done a lot outside of the bar as well. What motivates you to continue to do good for the community as a whole?
Oh, I think that's an obligation of everybody. I sort of feel like everybody has to do their share. And I feel like you start rowing the boat in that sense of providing back for the community and providing for people around you, even when you're small, right? When you're a child, you can still contribute to your neighborhood, to your friends, to your immediate family, and to those around you. I think maybe it was because my parents were public servants, my mom an FBI administrator, and then a school teacher working with special needs kids, and my dad serving his career as an FBI agent. I think that informs your sense of the world, that part of what you do in your profession is serve, and that there's nothing to be sheepish about using that term, but that it's honorable. I always thought that. I always thought serving other people was meaningful. So I had a deep sense of civic duty, like clean up the yard. If you can take the sidewalk, don't walk through someone's lawn, and don't ride your bike in ways in the neighborhood that make the neighbors kind of sigh at all these kids going by. Say hello and look up and smile at someone. And simple gestures of civic engagement, I think, matter. The kindness with which we greet each person and the dignity we hold for other people. I think that is civic engagement at its root system, and then it emerges in the different ways we all contribute. And I feel like lawyering is really just an extension of that. I mean, what a gift that my profession sort of asks me to do this every day. And teaching and talking about the law is a treat for me. You can probably tell I take a lot of passion and a lot of joy at talking about the rule of law. And so like being in a school setting with young people or being in the neighborhood helping negotiate something that perhaps seems intractable for people, even really just finding a way to do something simple that's a gesture of gratitude, I feel like is basically an extension of lawyering, right? Because part of what I feel the role of a lawyer is to bring steadiness to a situation that someone can't solve for themselves, right? You wouldn't go visit a lawyer ordinarily. We just don't do that. And just like we don't consult a doctor if we don't need care, if we could solve our problems for ourselves, or we could perhaps find a way to navigate a relationship that's challenging, we wouldn't necessarily employ lawyers. And so lawyers are invited into the most difficult moments of people's lives. And that really is a privileged role. One of my early mentors in the law talked to me about, do you understand? Someone's going to invite you into their life, into their family, and you have to hold them at a professional distance, but you have to care about the idea of the invitation. They're asking you to something that's so hard. And this was a colleague who worked in criminal law. So I would have expected him to be somewhat jaded and tough in his exterior. And he was so willing to share with me the vulnerability of being a defense attorney. The level of care he took with that role purposefully, that it was constitutionally derived and that has value, but also that there's an emotional awareness you have to have as a lawyer to be really good at your role. And so I think bringing gratitude, bringing joy, bringing civic engagement, wanting to serve is just a way of me marrying my professional and personal halves as if they were distinct. I think of, sometimes everyone talks about a right brain and a left brain, but I think of it as my lawyer self and my non-lawyer self, but they get all muddled in there somewhere. Maybe that's why I'm a mediator, because I can find ways to sort of tease apart the skills and put them back together in ways that work for other people. But I think that that's really the essence of lawyering, and it's also really our call as people. It's how we should be with each other. And I'm certainly no one's paragon or example of any of that every day, but I'm hoping little drops in the bucket are collecting somewhere. I'm hoping to make a dent in that somehow.
So how does it make you feel that this is a core value of yours, giving service, and now you're being recognized for it?
It is the most humbling experience. Honestly, I'm not moved to tears in my office in a sort of in a self-interested way super often. Every once in a while something will catch me, or a moment with colleagues or a moment in a courtroom might catch me, and I find myself reflecting to the point of becoming emotional about it. But when I read the dean's email indicating that my alma mater was honoring my public service using my name in the same sentence as Joe Quinney's name, I mean, this is a person who is held as an example in our Utah, and specifically our Salt Lake City community, of endorsing the arts and celebrating sports and bringing the community together in addition to his lawyering. I mean, the idea of that is sort of monumental when you think about who this person was and what he meant to the community, both as an advocate as well as a public servant. And I know so many of my colleagues' work is worthy of this recognition as well. And so I feel very humbled by the idea that I'm being singled out here. I feel inclined to want to celebrate my friends in this act, but also then to want to honor my parents, my husband, our kids, all the people who influence the way I try to approach the world. Noticing that we all do it badly sometimes, and we all make mistakes and need to find room for each other when we're really passionate about something or really ardent about something, and we don't see or hear each other well, or we don't behave in a way that reflects our best self. And what I'm hoping is maybe this award can continue to be a reminder for me of the need to give grace, and hope that grace is given to me, because I'm certain that there are times even folks who hear about the award go, "Really, Michelle? I'm not sure." she has an edge for me, or she's really passionate and partisan about certain things, and I am. I mean, before my feet hit the floor in the morning, I probably have 10 opinions before I even have gone to brush my teeth. So I'm certain I can be a very difficult personality on occasion to deal with. My husband's somewhere and my children are somewhere rolling their eyes. On occasion is the phrase that they found in that sentence that was funny. But I know that part of also what my skill set is, because I'm a lawyer, is that I can maybe talk to someone in those hardest times, or I can maybe listen in those hardest times. And if that's what I find myself, sort of reflecting on, and it becomes a hallmark of what I do, then I don't know that I can ask a lot more of myself in my career. That feels like a privilege, really, and a treat. What a joy to perform that all the time, and the rigor of that, to bring your skill set, to bring your passion, your personality, your faith, all of your relationship skills, even when they fail you, to bring all of it to the table and want to give that to someone else. I don't know that I can think of a better way to spend my time.
I love that. I think I have one more question.
Okay.
So and if I miss something, don't hesitate to
Gosh, this
share
has been
something.
pretty wide-ranging, but I feel like we're doing an okay job at
I think so
summarizing
too.
things.
Yeah, I kind of want to take this down. I'm like, oh, this is blocking me having a great view of you. I think that you mentioned, you were talking about lawyering and your non-lawyering and your lawyering brains.
Yes.
What advice would you give to an aspiring lawyer?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is if you are an aspiring lawyer, if you're thinking about going to law school, my advice to anyone who's thinking about it is they should go. I almost am of the mind that everybody should go to law school to a certain extent. I feel like reading our foundational principles and reading the documents that inform who we are, that define our nation, that define our governance, that define us as a people together, really is a tremendous asset of being in the world in a different way. It's hard to lend language to rules and to have something that balances all the things you want to describe for someone when you're drafting rules, right? The notion of responsibility and duty and action on the part of someone that owes something, but then also the idea of privilege and freedom and artistic sense and individuality. How do you carve that out in language, and how do you really do that? One of my other mentors in law school who taught American legal history talked about what would it be like if you went to the store and went to purchase a board game and you had to tell everyone at the table, play the game, but no one could read the lid of the game for the rules. What would that look like? And the idea of that highlights for me the value of a lawyer, right? Someone who has to sit down and write down the rules and balance responsibility and fairness and action and duty and calling people forward to say, these are the things you owe. And then trying to do it in a way that's fair and balanced. And I say everybody should probably have those exercises underneath their educational belt. But if you don't want to go to law school, I can sort of understand. I guess I can tolerate that in other people. But if you're inclined to go, I say go. If you can make it happen for yourself, then do that. What you'll find also is that your non-lawyer self is needed in the profession. All the lived experiences and all the ways you are and all the things you aren't are needed in the profession, because we represent the widest range of people and issues and concerns and emotions in American courtrooms today than ever. And that's only going to continue to broaden, right? The need for lawyers to be able to enunciate something in the most difficult of circumstances will never cease to be needed in a society where people have relationships with each other. It's just a fact of being. We're not always going to get along. We're not always going to agree. Sometimes we can't even enunciate what we really want or what we think. We're just stuck. And that notion of being stuck, you need someone to guide you out. And when it can't be a friend, when it can't be a doctor, when it can't be your family because they believe in you or your ideas in a particular way, it's a lawyer who can hold your hand and navigate the process out of the stuckness. And I love that as a profession and as a concept. And so everybody who thinks they should go to law school should, because we need a profession that's as wide-ranging and effective and as artistic and scientific and as concrete and as nimble as we can possibly craft. And we need an institution that honors who they are together and the totality of all of those circumstances and people to really then speak to the other institutions, the courts, the legislature, the executives, to say, these are people who can speak for the rest of us, and these are people who can change and influence things, but sometimes they just influence things in their style. So growing up in a small town, maybe you know something about people and you have a nuance to the way that you communicate. Maybe if you grew up on a farm, it's different than how someone who only grew up in a city ever knows how to be in the world. But there's instinct about both, and there's value to bringing both. So I can't perceive of a person or a background that isn't well suited to law school. I sort of challenge us to say that these notions that, oh, someone should only major in certain things, or someone should only come from particular backgrounds. It's false, because our clients and our cases don't come from there. Our issues, our controversies, our conflict with each other don't come from these defined boxes. They're gray and nuanced and subtle, and so all the people who are inclined to go and want to work on a problem and maybe help solve it should find their way And maybe you find law school isn't you because of the way it's structured. Okay, but it served you to be part of it. And now how are you going to influence the policies and businesses and industry and life around you? If it's not through serving as a lawyer, maybe you learned about another niche or another profession within the legal industry. Maybe you learn about banking in a particular way, or tax law in a particular way that lends you down a certain path to serving. Or maybe you learn about law enforcement and have a different impetus for your wanting to be part of the legal profession, but it's through a different lens. Whatever it is, my instinct about that is that we should be encouraging young people and everyone, frankly. I can't think of also other professional industries that couldn't benefit from people who are cross-trained and interdisciplinary in their focus. That I think we can all lend something to each other, and it's not simply exclusively as a lawyer, as an advocate. Maybe it's lawyer as counselor, maybe it's lawyer as guide, maybe it's as a communicator, maybe it's as a negotiator. There's a wide range of things lawyers can do, which really draws me back to your first question of why do this? Because who wouldn't want to? I guess is my question. Like, who would want to do something different? I get that my friends and my peers and my family all do different things and they love it and they're good at it, and I feel grateful for that. But lawyering is spectacular. It's so open to possibility and to creating what you want in the profession. It's a credential almost to then do all the things you dream about doing. And that for me was sort of the gift of going to law school, certainly going to the College of Law at the university, which is what the Quinney College of Law was named at the time that I went. I'm dating myself. That's what the old law school building was called. And now this new vibrant place of study and the convergence of the community and these law students who are just going to do spectacular things. I can't wait. They're going to solve the dissenting issue that's nagging at me. Why don't we have an opinion that says X or Y? Well, the advocate who's going to lend their voice to that is coming, right? They're coming around the corner. The advocate who's going to see a client in a particular way that's different than anyone has ever seen this issue or this conflict. They're coming out of law school, and they're coming ready to charge, ready to run. They're not walking out. They're ready to really tackle things, and that just feels exciting. And we get this new crop of people every year. What a gift also of a profession to sort of have resurgence and resilience in the profession, to have that built into our legal history also through decision making and dissent, and then the wheel of policy developing itself anew. That just, all of it. I can't think of a side of going to law school and of lawyering that I don't find that I would want to encourage someone else to potentially pursue.
Right on. Well, I'm going to take advantage because I'm video recording you, and you're able to bring Sun Valley back. And so could we record an invitation from you to our licensees?
So summertime 2026. Okay, friends, you've been saying, Michelle, why are we not going back to Sun Valley? Are we going back to Sun Valley this summer? Well, we're not going back in the next season. We are going back in the next year. And I can't tell you how excited I am to host us again. The Sun Valley Resort is sort of an ideal home away from home for us. Not in Utah, but it captures sort of that Utah spirit of community and the mountains and recreation and sport, as well as just finding space for family and friends and some good food and some spectacular scenery and weather to boot sprinkled in. But we're also going to sprinkle in some CLE. We're going to bring up some wonderful academic conversations and some ways to influence the profession. We're going to keep some amazing traditions at Sun Valley. We cannot wait to host our law school reunions and to host all the different ways we can convene each other and see each other again and pull out phones and find pictures of all the vacations and the weddings and the new children and new in-laws that everybody has that we want to share pictures of and show everybody about. But we're also super excited as a bar, as the bar staff, as the CLE department, and especially our sections of the bar, to convene us in meaningful conversation, to really bring us together. What can we do better? How can we improve our profession? How can we influence our collective well-being? That is really the spirit of Sun Valley. And off we go, August 2026. I say be there or be square.
Right on.